and welcome to my channel. Today's video is a little different in that I'm going to outline my personal experience of the NDIS process as a parent of a child with a disability. I've broken this down into 10 steps, from the very first phone call to the final step of accessing funded therapies for my daughter, who is autistic. So let's get straight into it. Step 1. The realization that my daughter was going to need support, more than we could possibly afford. This was really step 1, and for me it felt like jumping off a cliff. I had so many questions, like if I apply for NDIS, does this mean my child has a diagnosis? Are we then locked in and labelled for life? Who will I talk to? A paediatrician, a general practitioner, a speech pathologist, an occupational therapist? So this took me to step number 2, the first phone call. My first point of contact was a machine. I was given the number of our local NDIS partner from our local community health service after being referred to community health by my GP when my daughter was not meeting her milestones. I was told that I needed to call them if I wanted to set up NDIS for my child, which would then allow us to access therapies. I still had about 100 questions at this point, but let's continue. I phoned the number and was put through to an answering service, which asked me to leave my name and phone number, which I did. I even managed to do it without crying. The message said that I would be contacted by phone within 14 days. Step 3. The NDIS partner. They called me back in 10 days. This phone call was around 15 minutes, and the subject of the phone call was registering my daughter with NDIS to see if she was eligible to be an NDIS participant. I answered questions about her independence, such as how she functioned in different areas: her speech and language, her gross motor, her fine motor, her cognitive functioning, her social skills, her communication skills, her self-care. This conversation was as hard as it was necessary. Step 4. The NDIS. 6 weeks from that registration phone call, a rep from the NDIS contacted me on the phone and then SMS. I was unable to answer at the time of the phone call, so they also left a voicemail. I was offered potential dates and times for an initial interview at my home where we would discuss my child and her needs. I was offered around 5 different dates and times over a 2-week period. I replied via SMS, accepting one of the appointments. Step 5. The first face-to-face contact with NDIS. The NDIS rep came to my home at the prearranged time. She was professional, non-judgmental, efficient and empathetic. Over a 2 to 3 hour period, we discussed my child's individual needs across all domains in incredible detail. She recorded my answers on her laptop as we spoke. At this time, I was asked if I had any supporting documentation, such as reports from a speech pathologist or a paediatrician. At this point, we had only been to community health, where we had seen the screening team. This team was made up of a speech pathologist, an occupational therapist, and a physiotherapist. They had written me a report, which I provided to the NDIS representative. Step 6. The application. While at my home, the NDIS rep started my application and emailed me a separate application form to complete, which I needed to complete before my application could be formally submitted to NDIS. I finished it that night and emailed it to her. It was approximately 5 pages. The full application was submitted to NDIS approximately 3 days later. Step 7. Accepted. Approximately 2 to 3 weeks after this, I received a phone call from our NDIS rep telling me that my child had been accepted as an NDIS participant. We booked a planning meeting again at my home for 2 weeks' time. Step 8. The planning meeting. The planning meeting, which took around 2.5 hours, involved setting goals for my daughter in each functioning domain: fine motor, gross motor, self-care, social skills, to name just a few. The NDIS rep started to put together my child's NDIS plan, which was submitted in the following days. Step 9. Budget and NDIS plan. 2 weeks later, the NDIS rep contacted me again and emailed through my daughter's completed plan. This included how much money had been allocated from NDIS for therapies and supports. In other words, the budget for her plan. I also elected to have a plan manager at this point instead of self-managing. This is someone who coordinates payments to therapists. It's an available service funded by the NDIS, and it did not come out of my daughter's budget. And finally, step 10, we commence speech therapy, occupational therapy, and music therapy, and from time to time, we employ a disability support worker. So this was my personal experience in 2023 of the NDIS process from start to therapy. It took approximately 17 weeks or around 4 months. This process was completely separate to our first visit to a paediatrician and our diagnosis journey. As always, I'd love to read any questions or comments you might have, especially regarding your experience with the NDIS.